Right now, as you listen to these words, you exist in 11 dimensions. Not 3, not 4, but 11. You're breathing 11-dimensional air, thinking 11-dimensional thoughts, and experiencing reality through an 11-dimensional lens you never knew you had. Most remarkably, you've been doing this your entire life, without the slightest awareness that 10 of those dimensions even exist. Welcome back to this quiet corner of the universe, where we explore the deepest mysteries of existence. I'm here to guide you through one of the most profound discoveries in modern physics, one that suggests reality is far stranger and more beautiful than we ever imagined tonight. We're venturing into the theoretical landscape of M-theory and the 11th dimension, a place where mathematics meets mystery, where the impossible becomes inevitable, and where you might discover that everything you thought you knew about your own existence was just the beginning. If you've never been here before, settle in, get comfortable. You don't need to understand every equation or memorize every concept. Just let these ideas wash over you like waves of possibility. And if you're returning, welcome home. Your curiosity has brought you to exactly the right place. Before we drift deeper, take a moment to notice where you are right now. The room around you, the chair beneath you, the air filling your lungs. What if I told you that this seemingly solid reality is actually a shadow, a projection cast by something infinitely more complex? What if your consciousness, your very sense of self, extends far beyond the boundaries of your physical body into dimensions that stretch across the cosmos? These aren't questions from science fiction. They emerge from some of the most rigorous mathematical frameworks ever developed, theories that attempt to explain the fundamental nature of everything that exists. And as we'll discover together, they suggest that you are already living in the 11th dimension, whether you realize it or not. To understand how you exist in 11 dimensions, we need to begin with a simple question that has haunted physicists for decades. Why does our universe work the way it does? Why do particles behave as they do? Why do the forces of nature have the precise strengths they possess? And perhaps most mysteriously, why does mathematics describe reality so perfectly? The answer, according to some of the most brilliant minds in theoretical physics, lies hidden in dimensions we cannot see, cannot touch, and until recently, could barely imagine. These aren't the familiar 3 dimensions of space plus 1 of time that we experience daily. These are dimensions folded so tightly, curved so elegantly that they escape our everyday perception while fundamentally shaping every aspect of our existence. Picture this: you're looking at a garden hose from across a large field. From that distance, the hose appears to be a simple, one-dimensional line. But as you walk closer, you begin to see that it has thickness, circumference, a hidden dimension that was always there but invisible from afar. An ant crawling along the hose experiences both dimensions, the length and the circumference, while you from a distance only perceive the length. This gentle analogy captures something profound about the nature of reality itself. What we experience as 3-dimensional space might be like that distant view of the garden hose. There could be additional dimensions curled up so tightly at every point in space that we simply cannot perceive them directly. They're not somewhere else, not in some far-off realm. They're right here, right now, woven into the very fabric of the space you're occupying this moment. The mathematical framework that describes this hidden architecture is called M-theory, and it represents one of the most ambitious attempts to understand the fundamental nature of existence. M-theory didn't emerge overnight. It grew from decades of work on string theory, a revolutionary approach that replaced the idea of point-like particles with tiny vibrating strings of energy. String theory originally required 10 dimensions for mathematical consistency, but in the 1990s, physicists made a startling discovery. The 5 different versions of string theory that had been developed weren't actually separate theories at all. They were different perspectives on a single, more fundamental theory that existed in 11 dimensions. This discovery marked what physicists call the second superstring revolution, and it changed everything. The 11th dimension isn't just another spatial direction you could point to if you had the right tools. It represents something more subtle and more profound. In some interpretations of M-theory, this dimension functions as a kind of master dimension, one that determines the coupling strength between strings, transforming them into higher dimensional objects, called membranes or brains. Think of it this way. In our familiar 3-dimensional world, we have points, lines, and surfaces. String theory introduced the idea that fundamental particles are actually one-dimensional strings vibrating in higher dimensional space. But M-theory revealed that these strings are just one type of object in a much richer landscape. There are also 2-dimensional membranes, 3-dimensional blobs, and even higher dimensional structures extending up to 9 dimensions, all existing within the 11-dimensional framework. As you listen to this, take a breath and consider the possibility that your body, your thoughts, your entire experience of being alive might be taking place not just in the familiar dimensions of height, width, and depth, but in a space with 7 additional dimensions folded invisibly around every atom of your being. The way these extra dimensions are configured isn't arbitrary. The exact shape and size of the hidden dimensions determine the laws of physics we observe. The masses of particles, the strengths of forces, the very constants that make chemistry and biology possible, all emerge from the geometry of spaces we cannot directly perceive. These hidden dimensions take the form of what mathematicians call Calabi-Yau manifolds, named after Eugenio Calabi and Xing-Tung Yau. These aren't just abstract mathematical objects. They're potential blueprints for the architecture of reality itself. Imagine shapes so complex, so intricate, that they require 6 dimensions just to exist. These shapes are compact, meaning they're finite in size with no edges or boundaries, like the surface of a sphere extended into 6 dimensions. At every point in the space around you, one of these 6-dimensional Calabi-Yau manifolds might be curled up, invisible to your senses, but fundamentally determining how particles interact, how forces behave, and how the universe unfolds. The electrons flowing through your nervous system, the photons carrying this information to your eyes or ears, the gravitational field holding you to the Earth. All of these phenomena might be manifestations of the geometry of hidden dimensions, but here's where the story becomes even more intriguing. There aren't just a few possible Calabi-Yau manifolds. Mathematicians have identified tens of thousands of them, each representing a different way the extra dimensions could be configured. Each configuration would result in a universe with different physical laws, different particles, different possibilities for complexity and life. This abundance of possibilities leads to one of the most mind-bending implications of M-theory. If all these configurations are mathematically valid, and if the underlying theory is correct, then they might all exist, not as abstract possibilities, but as actual physical realities. This framework naturally gives rise to what physicists call the multiverse, an ensemble of universes where every possible configuration of the hidden dimensions plays out. Pause for a moment and imagine that everything you've ever known, every star, you've ever seen, every breath you've ever taken exists on the surface of a vast three-dimensional membrane floating in a space with more dimensions than your mind can easily grasp. This isn't poetry or metaphor. This is one of the central insights of M-theory. In this framework, our entire universe might be what physicists call a three-brane, a three-dimensional surface embedded in the 11-dimensional space of M-theory. All the matter and energy we observe, all the forces except gravity, would be confined to this brain. We would be like two-dimensional beings living on the surface of a sphere, unaware of the three-dimensional space that contains our entire reality. But gravity, that familiar force that keeps your feet on the ground and holds the planets in their orbits, might be different. Gravity might have the ability to leak into the extra dimensions, to propagate through the higher dimensional space that contains our brain. This could explain why gravity seems so much weaker than the other fundamental forces. The electromagnetic force that allows atoms to stick together is about 10 to the 36th power times stronger than gravity. Perhaps gravity only appears weak because most of its strength is diluted across the hidden dimensions we cannot access. This perspective radically reframes what it means to exist. You're not just a collection of atoms arranged in a particular pattern within three-dimensional space. You're a pattern of information, energy, and structure existing on a three-dimensional surface that floats within an 11-dimensional ocean of possibility. The implications extend far beyond physics. If consciousness emerges from the complex interactions of matter and energy, and if matter and energy exist on a brain within higher dimensional space, then consciousness itself might have access to information from those higher dimensions. This remains highly speculative, but some interpretations suggest that awareness, intuition, and even creativity might involve subtle interactions with the higher dimensional structure of reality. Consider the strange phenomenon of quantum entanglement, where particles become correlated in ways that seem to transcend the limitations of space and time. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance, but perhaps it's not spooky at all. Perhaps entangled particles are connected through higher dimensions, taking shortcuts through 11-dimensional space that appear instantaneous from our three-dimensional perspective. The mathematics of M-theory allows for objects called open membranes, two-dimensional surfaces that can stretch between different branes. If our universe is one brain among many, these membranes could provide pathways for information or influence to travel between different realms of existence. The endpoints of such membranes would appear as strings within each brain, potentially explaining how particles and forces emerge from higher dimensional geometry. As you contemplate this possibility, notice how it changes your relationship to the space around you. The air between your hands isn't empty, it's filled with the ghostly presence of higher dimensions, curled and folded in patterns too complex for ordinary perception, but potentially accessible to consciousness in ways we're only beginning to understand. Reality, according to M-theory, resembles a vast symphony played across 11 dimensions, where every particle, every force, every moment of experience represents a note in a cosmic composition of staggering complexity and beauty. You're not just listening to this symphony, you're part of it, a conscious instrument contributing to a performance that has been unfolding for billions of years. The strings that vibrate in higher dimensional space don't just create particles, they create the potential for particles, the probability waves that quantum mechanics describes. When a quantum measurement occurs, when a wave function collapses into a definite outcome, this might represent the moment when information from higher dimensions crystallizes into the three-dimensional reality we can observe. Think about the strange behavior of quantum particles. They can exist in superposition, being in multiple states simultaneously until observed. They can tunnel through barriers that should be impossible to cross. They can exhibit non-local correlations that seem to violate the speed of light. From our three-dimensional perspective, these phenomena appear mysterious, even magical. But from the perspective of 11-dimensional M-theory, they might simply reflect the natural behavior of objects that extend into dimensions we cannot perceive. A particle in superposition might not be in multiple states simultaneously within our three-dimensional space. Instead, it might be a single, extended object that appears to have multiple states when we can only observe its three-dimensional projection. Quantum tunneling might occur when particles take shortcuts through higher dimensions, appearing to teleport from our limited perspective. Quantum entanglement might reflect the fact that seemingly separate particles are actually connected through higher dimensional structures we cannot see. This interpretation suggests that quantum mechanics isn't describing the fundamental randomness of reality. Instead, it might be describing the limitations of our three-dimensional perspective on a deterministic but higher dimensional universe. What appears random and mysterious from our viewpoint might be perfectly ordered and comprehensible from the perspective of 11 dimensions. The implications for consciousness are profound. If awareness emerges from quantum processes in the brain, and if quantum processes reflect higher dimensional physics, then consciousness might naturally have access to information and perspectives that transcend ordinary three-dimensional experience. This could provide a scientific framework for understanding phenomena like intuition, creativity, and even mystical experiences. Some researchers have proposed that consciousness itself might operate as a field phenomenon that extends beyond individual brains. In this view, what we experience as separate minds might be localized expressions of a more fundamental field of awareness that permeates higher dimensional space. This field-based model of consciousness suggests that individual awareness might be connected through higher dimensional structures in ways that transcend conventional space and time. Consider the phenomenon of synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that seem too improbable to be mere chance. From a three-dimensional perspective, such events appear mysterious. But if consciousness has access to higher dimensional information, synchronicities might reflect the natural flow of causation across dimensions we cannot ordinarily perceive. As you reflect on these possibilities, pay attention to your own experience of awareness. Notice how your consciousness seems to extend beyond the physical boundaries of your brain, how thoughts and emotions seem to arise from somewhere deeper than neural activity alone. This sense of consciousness extending beyond the body might not be an illusion. It might be a direct experience of your higher dimensional nature. The mathematics of M-theory suggests that information cannot be destroyed, only transformed. If consciousness represents a pattern of information encoded in higher dimensional structures, then awareness itself might be as fundamental and indestructible as energy or matter. This perspective offers a radically different view of personal identity and the nature of existence itself. Every morning when you wake up, you're emerging not just from sleep, but from a state where your consciousness might have been exploring higher dimensional realms without the constraints of waking logic. Dreams often feature impossible geometries, spaces that unfold in ways that defy three-dimensional physics, experiences of flying or moving through solid objects that might actually represent glimpses of how consciousness operates when freed from the limitations of ordinary perception. If you enjoy exploring these ideas without interruption, members of our community get every episode 48 hours early, completely ad-free. They also receive extended discussions and bonus content that delves even deeper into these mysteries. You can join them whenever you feel ready, but for now, let's continue this journey together. The structure of dreams often mirrors the mathematical properties of higher dimensional spaces. In dreams, distant locations can be adjacent, past and future can exist simultaneously, and identity can be fluid in ways that reflect the topological properties of folded dimensions. Lucid dreaming, where awareness persists within the dream state, might represent a natural ability of consciousness to navigate higher dimensional space. Directly, recent neuroscientific research has revealed that the brain maintains quantum coherence at temperatures and scales previously thought impossible. Microtubules, tiny structural elements within neurons, appear to support quantum processes that could theoretically interact with higher dimensional physics. This suggests that the boundary between consciousness and quantum mechanics might be far more porous than traditionally assumed. The phenomenon of déjà vu, that eerie sense of having experienced something before, might reflect moments when consciousness briefly accesses parallel quantum states or alternate configurations of higher dimensional space. Instead of being a glitch in memory, déjà vu could represent a glimpse of the multiplicity of realities that exist simultaneously within the 11-dimensional framework. Consider also the strange properties of creativity and insight. Ideas often seem to emerge from nowhere, arriving fully formed in consciousness without apparent logical derivation. Scientists, artists, and inventors frequently report that their greatest discoveries came not from methodical reasoning, but from sudden flashes of understanding that seem to come from beyond ordinary thought. If consciousness has access to higher dimensional information, these moments of inspiration might represent instances when awareness briefly transcends its usual three-dimensional limitations. The practice of meditation and contemplative awareness might serve as a natural technology for expanding consciousness into higher dimensions. When the ordinary activities of the mind quiet down, when the constant stream of thoughts and sensations settles into stillness, consciousness might naturally begin to access information and perspectives that exist beyond the boundaries of individual brains. Many meditative traditions describe experiences of expanded awareness, of consciousness that extends beyond the personal self to encompass larger patterns of existence. From the perspective of M theory, these experiences might represent genuine access to higher dimensional aspects of reality rather than mere subjective states or wishful thinking. The sense of interconnectedness that often emerges in deep states of consciousness might reflect the actual higher dimensional structure of reality, where what appears separate from our three-dimensional perspective is revealed to be aspects of a unified 11-dimensional whole. Your individual consciousness might be like a wave on an ocean, appearing distinct from the surface, but fundamentally inseparable from the deeper currents that flow through higher dimensional space. As you contemplate these possibilities, notice how your sense of self begins to expand. The boundaries between inner and outer, between self and cosmos, might be artifacts of our limited, three-dimensional perception, rather than fundamental features of reality. In 11 dimensions, the distinction between observer and observed, between consciousness and universe, might dissolve into a more fundamental unity. This perspective doesn't diminish the importance of individual experience or personal identity. Instead, it suggests that what you are extends far beyond what you typically imagine yourself to be. Your thoughts, emotions, and experiences might be local manifestations of patterns that stretch across dimensions you cannot ordinarily perceive, connected to the deeper structures of existence itself. The implications extend to questions about death and continuity of consciousness. If awareness represents information encoded in higher dimensional structures, then what we call death might simply be a transition from one configuration of consciousness to another, rather than a termination of existence. This remains highly speculative, but the mathematical framework of M-theory allows for such possibilities in ways that purely materialist perspectives cannot. Reality, it turns out, might be fundamentally geometric, not in the simple sense of shapes and angles we learn in school, but in the profound sense that the deepest laws of physics emerge from the curvature and topology of higher dimensional space. Every equation that describes how particles behave, every force that shapes the cosmos, every constant that makes chemistry and biology possible, might be expressions of pure geometry unfolding across 11 dimensions. This geometric view of existence suggests that you are not separate from the mathematical structure of reality. You are that structure, experiencing itself from a particular perspective within its own unfolding. Your consciousness, your body, your entire life story might be manifestations of patterns in 11-dimensional space, as natural and inevitable as the way a sphere curves back on itself, or the way a complex number spirals through mathematical space. The Calabi-Yau manifolds that describe the hidden dimensions aren't static, frozen geometries. They can evolve, transform, and even undergo phase transitions that would appear as fundamental changes in the laws of physics from our three-dimensional perspective. The history of the universe, from the Big Bang through the formation of stars and galaxies to the emergence of life and consciousness, might represent the unfolding of a single, incomprehensibly complex geometric pattern across 11-dimensional space. Your personal history, too, might be encoded in this geometry. The specific configuration of the hidden dimensions might determine not just the general laws of physics, but also the particular patterns of matter and energy that give rise to your unique form of consciousness. In this view, your individual perspective, your specific way of experiencing reality, represents information that has been encoded in the structure of space itself. This doesn't imply fatalism or the absence of free will. Instead, it suggests that choice and possibility are built into the fundamental geometry of existence. The branching paths of decision, the quantum superpositions that collapse into definite outcomes, the creative emergence of novelty and complexity, all of these might reflect the natural properties of 11-dimensional space as it explores its own infinite potential. As we approach the end of this first exploration into the 11th dimension, take a moment to reflect on how these ideas might already be manifesting in your own experience. Have you ever had moments of knowing that seem to come from beyond logical thought? Have you felt connections to other people or to nature that transcended ordinary causation? Have you experienced states of consciousness where the boundaries of self seem to dissolve into something larger? These experiences might not be anomalies or wishful thinking. They might be direct encounters with your own higher dimensional nature, glimpses of the 11-dimensional being you have always been, whether you realized it or not. The journey of awakening to this deeper reality has only just begun, and there are dimensions of possibility waiting to be explored that we've barely touched upon. In our next exploration, we'll delve deeper into the practical implications of existing in 11 dimensions, examining how this understanding might transform our approach to consciousness, creativity, and the very meaning of existence itself. We'll explore the cutting-edge research that's beginning to bridge the gap between theoretical physics and direct experience, and we'll discover how you might begin to consciously access the higher dimensional aspects of your own being. Until then, rest in the knowledge that you are already complete, already connected to the deeper structures of reality, already existing in dimensions of beauty and possibility that stretch far beyond anything the ordinary mind can conceive. You are not just in the universe, you are the universe experiencing itself through the unique window of your consciousness, participating in an 11-dimensional dance that has been unfolding since the beginning of time. And speaking of consciousness, you might find our previous exploration particularly illuminating. Scientists are split. Is consciousness actually quantum? It examines the growing evidence that awareness itself might operate through quantum processes, setting the stage for understanding how consciousness might naturally access the higher dimensional aspects of reality we've begun to explore today. Sweet dreams, fellow traveller through the dimensions. The journey has only just begun. Only just begun. As we settle deeper into this exploration, let me share something that might seem impossible at first. Right now, in this very moment, you're participating in a conversation that extends far beyond the words flowing between us. If the mathematics of M theory holds true, then every thought arising in your consciousness, every flutter of recognition or wonder, might be creating ripples that propagate through dimensions your eyes will never see. This isn't mysticism disguised as science. It's an inevitable consequence of existing as a conscious being within an 11-dimensional framework. Consider how your awareness seems to extend beyond the physical boundaries of your brain. When you remember a childhood afternoon, when you anticipate tomorrow's possibilities, when you feel the presence of someone you love, even when they're far away, you're demonstrating capacities that transcend the limitations of three-dimensional space. The phenomenon becomes even more intriguing when we examine how information flows through consciousness. Thoughts don't simply appear randomly in your mind. They emerge from deeper currents of awareness, carrying with them qualities of meaning, emotion, and significance that seem to come from somewhere beyond the mechanical firing of neurons. Some interpretations of consciousness research suggest that awareness might function more like a field than a product of brain activity. A field that could theoretically extend into higher dimensional space. Imagine consciousness as a kind of 11-dimensional sensing apparatus, naturally attuned to information patterns that exist beyond ordinary perception. From this perspective, intuition wouldn't be guesswork or wishful thinking. It would be direct access to information encoded in the higher dimensional structure of reality itself. That sudden knowing that arises without logical derivation. That sense of rightness or wrongness that guides decision-making might represent consciousness operating in its natural 11-dimensional mode. The practice of deep listening, whether in meditation, contemplation, or simply quiet attention to the present moment, might serve as a natural technology for accessing this higher dimensional information. When the ordinary activities of the mind settle into stillness, when thoughts slow down and awareness becomes spacious, something remarkable often happens. The boundaries between inner and outer begin to soften. The sense of being a separate self looking out at an external world starts to dissolve into a more unified field of experiencing. Traditional contemplative practices from around the world describe states of consciousness where individual awareness expands to encompass larger patterns of existence. Mystics speak of union with the divine. Scientists describe peak experiences of cosmic consciousness, and ordinary people report moments of profound connection with nature or others that transcend normal categories of experience. If consciousness does have access to higher dimensional information, these experiences might represent genuine encounters with the 11-dimensional nature of reality, rather than subjective projections or altered brain states. As you reflect on this possibility, notice your own relationship to the space of awareness itself. Right now, as these words reach you, where is your consciousness located? Is it inside your head, behind your eyes, or does it seem to extend into the space around you? Many people discover that when they pay careful attention, consciousness doesn't feel confined to the physical boundaries of the body. It seems to inhabit a more spacious field that interpenetrates with the world rather than being separate from it. This sense of consciousness as a field rather than a product might reflect its actual higher dimensional nature. In 11-dimensional space, the distinction between inner and outer, between observer and observed, might be an artifact of our limited 3-dimensional perspective. What appears separate from our ordinary viewpoint might be revealed as aspects of a unified, higher dimensional whole when perceived from the broader context of M theory. The implications extend to our understanding of relationship and connection. If consciousness operates through higher dimensional structures, then the bonds between people, the sense of empathy and understanding that transcends verbal communication, might reflect actual informational connections that exist beyond ordinary space and time. Love, in this framework, wouldn't be merely an emotion or a biochemical process. It would be a form of higher dimensional entanglement, a genuine connection between conscious beings that persists across distances and even across time. Consider the phenomenon of simultaneous discovery in science and art. Throughout history, breakthrough ideas often emerge independently in multiple locations at roughly the same time. The calculus was developed simultaneously by Newton and Leibniz. The theory of evolution occurred to both Darwin and Wallace. Radio waves were discovered by multiple researchers within a few years of each other. From a purely materialist perspective, these synchronicities appear to be remarkable coincidences. But if consciousness has access to higher dimensional information fields, they might represent natural expressions of ideas whose time has come, information patterns that become available to anyone whose awareness is sufficiently open and prepared. This field-based model of consciousness suggests that individual minds might be more interconnected than we typically imagine. The collective unconscious that Jung described, the morphic fields that biologist Rupert Sheldrake proposes, the noosphere envisioned by Teilhard de Chardin, all of these concepts point toward the possibility that consciousness operates through structures that transcend individual brains and connect us in ways that pure materialism cannot easily explain. Every night, as you surrender to sleep, your consciousness begins a journey that might be far more literal than metaphorical. The landscapes of dreams often feature impossible architectures, spaces that unfold in ways that defy 3-dimensional physics, experiences of movement and transformation that might actually represent how consciousness naturally operates when freed from the constraints of waking perception. In dreams, you routinely experience phenomena that mirror the mathematical properties of higher dimensional space. Distant locations can be adjacent, past and future can coexist, identity can be fluid and multiple. The laws of physics seem suspended, allowing for flight, telepathy, and transformations that would be impossible in ordinary reality. Rather than dismissing these experiences as mere neural static or random brain activity, what if dreams represent consciousness, exploring its natural 11-dimensional habitat? The phenomenon of lucid dreaming, where awareness persists within the dream state while maintaining the capacity to influence the dream's unfolding, might represent a particularly clear example of consciousness operating in higher dimensional space. Lucid dreamers often report experiences of expanded awareness, access to information that wasn't available in the waking state, and encounters with forms of intelligence that seem to exist independently of the dreamer's ordinary personality. Some interpretations suggest that lucid dreaming might be a natural technology for conscious exploration of higher dimensional reality. Recent research in neuroscience has revealed that the brain maintains quantum coherence at temperatures and scales previously thought impossible. Microtubules, tiny structural elements within neurons, appear to support quantum processes that could theoretically interface with higher dimensional physics. This suggests that the boundary between consciousness and quantum mechanics might be far more porous than traditionally assumed, opening the possibility that awareness naturally operates through processes that extend beyond classical brain function. The timing of dreams also offers intriguing clues about their relationship to higher dimensional reality. Dreams often seem to unfold over hours or days of subjective time, while occupying only minutes of clock time. This compression or expansion of temporal experience might reflect consciousness accessing regions of 11-dimensional space, where time flows differently than in our ordinary 3-dimensional world. Even more mysteriously, precognitive dreams, where dreamers report experiencing future events before they occur in waking life, suggest that consciousness might have access to information that transcends the linear flow of time as we normally experience it. While such phenomena remain controversial and poorly understood, they point toward the possibility that awareness operates through structures that are not bound by the temporal limitations of 3-dimensional existence. The content of dreams often features symbolic and metaphorical elements that seem to convey meaning in ways that transcend literal interpretation. Dream symbols often carry emotional and intuitive significance that speaks to deeper patterns of understanding, as if consciousness in the dream state has access to forms of information that don't translate easily into ordinary language or logic. This symbolic dimension of dreaming might reflect consciousness operating in regions of higher dimensional space, where information exists in more condensed, archetypal forms. Many contemplative traditions have developed sophisticated practices for working with dream states as vehicles for spiritual development and expanded awareness. Tibetan Buddhism includes elaborate teachings on dream yoga, practices designed to maintain lucid awareness throughout the sleep cycle. These traditions often describe dreams as offering access to subtle dimensions of reality that interpenetrate with but extend beyond ordinary waking consciousness. As you consider these possibilities, pay attention to your own dream experiences. Notice how dreams often feel more emotionally significant than their bizarre content might logically warrant. Observe how dream memories can carry a sense of having visited actual places and encountered real beings, even when the rational mind dismisses them as fantasies. These qualitative aspects of dreaming might represent genuine encounters with higher dimensional aspects of reality, rather than mere projections of unconscious material. The transition states between waking and sleeping, The hypnagogic and hypnopompic phases often feature particularly vivid experiences of expanded awareness. In these liminal states, consciousness seems to operate with one foot in ordinary reality and one foot in something larger and more mysterious. Visions, voices, and encounters that occur during these transitions might represent moments when awareness is most naturally attuned to its higher dimensional environment. Reality, according to quantum mechanics, exists in a state of perpetual possibility until the moment of observation crystallizes potential into actuality. Every quantum event represents a branching point where multiple futures collapse into a single present. But what if these collapsed possibilities don't simply disappear? What if they continue to exist in parallel configurations of higher dimensional space, accessible to consciousness under certain conditions? This interpretation suggests that you don't just exist in one timeline moving forward through time. You exist simultaneously across multiple configurations of possibility, with your ordinary consciousness focused on one particular branch while remaining subtly connected to all the others. The phenomenon of déjà vu, that eerie sense of having experienced something before, might reflect moments when consciousness briefly accesses these parallel quantum states or alternate configurations of higher dimensional space. Instead of being a glitch in memory, déjà vu could represent a glimpse of the multiplicity of realities that exist simultaneously within the 11-dimensional framework of M theory. Your consciousness might be momentarily perceiving an event from the perspective of a slightly different timeline, one where the same experience occurred under similar but not identical circumstances. This would explain the characteristic feeling of familiarity combined with subtle wrongness that typically accompanies déjà vu experiences. The many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics suggests that every quantum measurement creates a branching of reality into parallel universes, each containing a different outcome of the measurement. While this interpretation remains controversial among physicists, it provides a framework for understanding how consciousness might have access to information from alternate configurations of reality. If consciousness operates through higher dimensional structures, it might naturally perceive echoes or shadows of these parallel worlds. Consider the phenomenon of quantum superposition, where particles exist in multiple states simultaneously until observed. From our three-dimensional perspective, this appears mysterious and counterintuitive. But from the perspective of 11-dimensional M theory, superposition might simply reflect the natural state of objects that extend into dimensions we cannot perceive. A particle in superposition might not be in multiple states simultaneously within our three-dimensional space. Instead, it might be a single, extended object that appears to have multiple states when we can only observe its three-dimensional projection. This geometric interpretation of quantum mechanics suggests that the apparent randomness and uncertainty of quantum events might be artifacts of our limited dimensional perspective rather than fundamental features of reality. What appears random and unpredictable from our three-dimensional viewpoint might be perfectly ordered and deterministic when viewed from the broader context of 11-dimensional space. Quantum entanglement, where particles become correlated in ways that seem to transcend the limitations of space and time, might represent connections through higher dimensions rather than mysterious action at a distance. If particles can extend into 11-dimensional space, then what appears as instantaneous correlation across vast distances might simply be different aspects of a single, higher dimensional object appearing separate from our limited perspective. The implications for consciousness are profound. If awareness emerges from quantum processes in the brain, and if quantum processes reflect higher dimensional physics, then consciousness might naturally have access to information and perspectives that transcend ordinary three-dimensional experience. This could provide a scientific framework for understanding phenomena like precognition, telepathy, and other forms of anomalous information transfer that seem to violate the limitations of classical physics. Some interpretations of consciousness research suggest that awareness might function as a kind of quantum field that extends beyond individual brains. In this view, what we experience as separate minds might be localized expressions of a more fundamental field of consciousness that permeates higher dimensional space. This field-based model suggests that individual awareness might be connected through higher dimensional structures in ways that transcend conventional space and time. The practice of meditation and contemplative awareness might serve as a natural technology for accessing these quantum dimensions of consciousness. When the ordinary activities of the mind quiet down, when the constant stream of thoughts and sensations settles into stillness, consciousness might naturally begin to access information and perspectives that exist beyond the boundaries of individual brains and ordinary space-time. As you contemplate these possibilities, notice how your own consciousness seems to operate with qualities that transcend the mechanical behavior of classical physics. The spontaneous emergence of creativity, the sudden arrival of insight, the intuitive knowing that guides decision-making, all of these might represent consciousness operating in its natural quantum mode, accessing information from higher dimensional structures that interpenetrate with but extend beyond ordinary reality. Take a breath and consider this startling possibility. In the vast laboratory of 11-dimensional space, every decision you've ever made, every path you've chosen not to take, every moment of possibility that didn't unfold in this timeline might be playing out simultaneously in parallel configurations of reality. You are not just one person living one life. You might be an infinite family of selves, each exploring different possibilities within the broader symphony of existence. This isn't science fiction or wishful thinking. It emerges naturally from the mathematics of M-theory, combined with the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. If consciousness has access to higher dimensional information, then awareness might naturally perceive echoes, shadows, or direct glimpses of these alternate versions of existence. Have you ever experienced moments of knowing that seem to come from beyond your personal history? Insights about people you've just met? Solutions to problems you haven't consciously worked on? Creative inspirations that arrive fully formed without apparent source? These experiences might represent consciousness accessing information from alternate versions of yourself, selves who made different choices, learned different lessons, and developed different capacities. The phenomenon of multiple personality or dissociative identity disorder, while often understood as psychological fragmentation, might in some cases represent consciousness accessing different configurations of selfhood that exist simultaneously across higher dimensional space. Rather than being purely pathological, such experiences might offer glimpses into the naturally multiple nature of identity within an 11-dimensional framework. Even in ordinary consciousness, the sense of self is far more fluid and multiple than we typically recognize. You are different when alone than when with others, different in the morning than in the evening, different when creating than when analyzing. These variations in selfhood might reflect consciousness naturally, accessing different aspects of its higher dimensional nature, rather than simply representing mood changes or social adaptations. The experience of profound personal growth and transformation also points toward the multiple nature of identity. When people undergo significant life changes, whether through spiritual practice, therapy, psychedelic experiences, or major life events, they often report feeling like completely different people. The old self doesn't just change or develop, it seems to be replaced by someone with different values, perspectives, and capacities. This might represent consciousness shifting its focus from one configuration of selfhood to another within the broader field of possibility. Dreams often feature versions of yourself behaving in ways that seem foreign to your waking personality. Dream. You might be more courageous, more creative, more foolish, or more wise than the self you recognize in ordinary life. Rather than dismissing these as fantasy projections, what if they represent encounters with alternate versions of yourself that exist in parallel configurations of higher dimensional space? The feeling of having met someone before, even when you're certain you've never encountered them in ordinary reality, might reflect consciousness recognizing a person who played a significant role in an alternate timeline. The immediate sense of trust or distrust, love or aversion that sometimes arises upon meeting new people might be consciousness accessing information from parallel configurations where different relationships unfolded. If you enjoy exploring these ideas without interruption, members of our community get every episode 48 hours early, completely ad-free. They also receive extended discussions and bonus content that delves even deeper into these mysteries. You can join them whenever you feel ready, but for now, let's continue this journey together. The practice of imagination and creative visualization might be far more than mental exercise. When you imagine yourself in different circumstances, with different qualities or living different lives, you might be temporarily accessing alternate configurations of yourself that exist simultaneously in higher dimensional space. The vividness and emotional reality of imaginative experiences might reflect their basis in actual parallel possibilities rather than mere fantasy. This perspective offers a radically different understanding of personal potential and development. Instead of being limited by your current circumstances, history, or conditioning, you might have access to the accumulated wisdom, skills, and perspectives of infinite alternate selves. The key would be learning how to consciously access and integrate information from these parallel configurations. Some contemplative traditions describe practices designed to access what they call past and future lives, alternate incarnations of consciousness that exist across different temporal configurations. From the perspective of 11-dimensional M theory, these might not be sequential lives separated by death and rebirth, but parallel expressions of consciousness that exist simultaneously across different regions of higher dimensional space. The phenomenon of channeling, where individuals report accessing the consciousness of other beings or accessing information from sources beyond their ordinary knowledge, might represent consciousness connecting with alternate configurations of selfhood or accessing information fields that exist in higher dimensional space. While such experiences remain controversial and poorly understood, they point toward the possibility that consciousness is far more fluid and interconnected than materialist perspectives suggest. As you reflect on these possibilities, notice how they change your relationship to your own identity and potential. If you are already connected to infinite alternate versions of yourself, then the limitations you perceive in your current life might be temporary constraints rather than fundamental boundaries. The qualities you admire in others, the capacities you wish you possessed, the wisdom you seek to develop, might already exist within the broader constellation of your multi-dimensional selfhood. Reality, from the perspective of 11 dimensions, resembles a vast web of interconnected meaning rather than a collection of separate objects moving through empty space. Every thought, every emotion, every moment of experience might be connected to every other through higher dimensional structures that transcend the apparent boundaries of individual minds and separate lives. This interconnected nature of existence might explain phenomena that seem mysterious from a purely materialist perspective. The simultaneous emergence of similar ideas in different locations, the spontaneous coordination of groups without explicit communication, the way certain insights seem to be in the air during particular historical periods, all of these might reflect consciousness accessing shared information fields that exist in higher dimensional space. The phenomenon of morphic resonance, proposed by biologist Rupert Sheldrake, suggests that patterns of organization in nature might be influenced by similar patterns from the past, as if information about successful forms and behaviors were somehow transmitted across space and time. While this concept remains controversial within mainstream science, it provides a framework for understanding how information might propagate through higher dimensional structures in ways that transcend ordinary causation. Consider how cultural movements emerge and spread. Ideas about art, music, politics, and spirituality often appear simultaneously in multiple locations without obvious causal connections. The renaissance of interest in meditation and consciousness studies, the emergence of environmental awareness, the development of quantum physics itself, all of these cultural phenomena seem to have emerged from deeper currents of collective understanding rather than from isolated individual insights. If consciousness has access to higher dimensional information fields, then the boundaries between individual minds might be more porous than we typically imagine. The collective unconscious that Jung described, the shared symbols and archetypal patterns that appear across cultures, might represent actual informational structures that exist in higher dimensional space and are accessible to consciousness under certain conditions. The experience of empathy, the ability to feel and understand the emotions of others, might reflect this interconnected nature of consciousness operating through higher dimensional structures. When you feel someone else's joy or pain, when you intuitively understand their perspective without verbal communication, you might be accessing information through higher dimensional connections that link all conscious beings. The phenomenon of prayer and distant healing, while remaining scientifically controversial, points toward the possibility that intention and focused awareness might have effects that transcend the limitations of ordinary space and time. If consciousness operates through higher dimensional structures, then focused intention might be able to influence events and conditions across distances that seem impossible from a three-dimensional perspective. Group meditation and collective contemplative practices often produce effects that seem to extend beyond the individuals directly involved. The sense of unity and connection that emerges in group meditation, the apparent synchronization of individual awareness into collective fields of consciousness, might reflect the natural tendency of consciousness to operate through higher dimensional structures when freed from the constraints of ordinary individual identity. The practice of compassion and loving kindness might be far more than mere ethical behavior or emotional cultivation. When you extend genuine care and goodwill toward others, you might be strengthening the higher dimensional connections that link all conscious beings, contributing to the health and coherence of the collective field of awareness that encompasses all life. This interconnected view of consciousness has profound implications for understanding personal responsibility and social transformation. If individual awareness is connected to collective fields of consciousness through higher dimensional structures, then personal development and spiritual growth might naturally contribute to the well-being of the larger whole. The work you do on yourself, the healing you accomplish in your own consciousness, might ripple through higher dimensional space to influence the collective field of human awareness. The experience of falling in love, the sense of profound connection and recognition that can arise between two people, might reflect the activation of higher dimensional connections that transcend ordinary personality and individual history. Love, in this framework, wouldn't be merely an emotion or a biochemical process. It would be a form of higher dimensional resonance, a recognition of the deeper unity that connects all conscious beings. As you contemplate this web of interconnection, notice how it changes your relationship to others and to the world around you. If consciousness operates through higher dimensional structures that connect all awareness, then the boundaries between self and other, between inner and outer, might be constructs of limited perception rather than fundamental features of reality. The suffering of others might be, in some sense, your own suffering. Their joy might be your joy. Their awakening might contribute to your own spiritual development, just as your growth might support their journey. Throughout history, human beings have developed technologies for accessing expanded states of consciousness, for touching the higher dimensional aspects of reality that normally remain hidden from ordinary awareness. These technologies aren't mechanical devices or digital systems. They are practices, techniques, and approaches that allow consciousness to operate in its natural 11-dimensional mode. The practice of meditation, in its many forms across cultures and traditions, might be understood as a fundamental technology for accessing higher dimensional information. When attention is withdrawn from the constant stream of thoughts and sensations, when awareness settles into stillness and spaciousness, something remarkable often occurs. The boundaries between inner and outer begin to dissolve. The sense of being a separate self, looking out at an external world, transforms into a more unified field of experiencing. Different meditation techniques might provide access to different aspects of higher dimensional consciousness. Concentration practices that focus attention on a single object might allow consciousness to penetrate deeply into the quantum structure of reality. Mindfulness practices that maintain open awareness of whatever arises might provide access to the vast field of information that flows through higher dimensional space. Loving kindness meditation might activate the higher dimensional connections that link all conscious beings. The phenomenon of mystical experience, reported across cultures and throughout history, might represent direct encounters with 11-dimensional reality, the sense of unity with the cosmos, the direct knowing that transcends conceptual understanding, the profound peace and love that characterize such experiences, might all reflect consciousness operating in its natural, higher dimensional mode. Contemplative prayer and devotional practices might serve similar functions, opening consciousness to information and influence that flows through higher dimensional space. The sense of divine presence, the experience of grace and guidance, the profound transformation that often accompanies deep spiritual practice might represent consciousness accessing the higher dimensional structures that connect individual awareness with larger patterns of meaning and purpose. The practice of art, music, and creative expression might also serve as technologies for accessing higher dimensional consciousness. When artists speak of inspiration, of channeling something beyond their ordinary personality, they might be describing genuine access to information fields that exist in higher dimensional space. The power of great art to move and transform people might reflect its capacity to transmit higher dimensional information through aesthetic forms. Even the practice of deep intellectual inquiry, the pursuit of truth through reason and investigation, might provide access to higher dimensional understanding. When scientists report moments of sudden insight, when mathematicians describe the elegant beauty of abstract relationships, when philosophers experience the profound recognition of fundamental principles, they might be accessing information that exists beyond the boundaries of ordinary three-dimensional cognition. The phenomenon of psychedelic experience, while remaining controversial and legally restricted in many contexts, appears to provide another avenue for accessing expanded states of consciousness. Research with substances like psilocybin, LSD, and DMT has revealed that these compounds can produce profound alterations in consciousness that often include experiences of unity, transcendence, and access to information that seems to come from beyond ordinary awareness. Some interpretations suggest that psychedelics might temporarily dissolve the neurological constraints that normally limit consciousness to three-dimensional perception, allowing awareness to access its natural, higher dimensional state. The practice of lucid dreaming, which we explored earlier, represents yet another technology for conscious exploration of higher dimensional space. Advanced lucid dreamers often report experiences of expanded awareness, access to information that wasn't available in the waking state, and encounters with forms of intelligence that seem to exist independently of the dreamer's ordinary personality. The cultivation of intuitive awareness, the practice of listening to the subtle guidance that arises from beyond rational thought, might be one of the most accessible technologies for accessing higher dimensional consciousness. When you learn to trust the quiet voice of inner knowing, when you follow the gentle nudges of intuitive guidance, you might be allowing consciousness to operate through its natural, higher dimensional capacities. As you consider these various technologies of transcendence, notice which ones resonates with your own experience and inclination. You might already have access to higher dimensional consciousness through practices you're already engaged in, even if you haven't recognized them as such. The key is learning to recognize when consciousness is operating in its expanded mode and how to cultivate and integrate these experiences into ordinary life. The ultimate technology might be the simple practice of presence itself, the cultivation of open, aware attention to whatever is arising in the moment. When consciousness is fully present, fully aware, fully open to the mystery of existence, it might naturally access the higher dimensional information that is always flowing through reality, waiting to be recognized and received. As we begin to draw this exploration toward a gentle close, take a moment to notice how your understanding of ordinary reality might be shifting. The chair you're sitting in, the air you're breathing, the thoughts arising in your consciousness, the very sense of being alive in this moment. All of these might be far more extraordinary than they appear. What seemed solid and separate might be revealed as interconnected. What felt limited and local might extend across dimensions you're only beginning to imagine. This shift in perspective doesn't require you to abandon your ordinary life or dismiss your everyday concerns. Instead, it invites you to recognize the profound mystery that was always hidden in plain sight. The mundane activities of daily existence, from brewing morning coffee to having conversations with friends, might be expressions of patterns that stretch across 11-dimensional space, manifestations of a cosmic intelligence that is simultaneously utterly transcendent and intimately present. Consider how this understanding might transform your relationship to difficulty and challenge. When life presents obstacles, when circumstances seem overwhelming, when the future appears uncertain, these experiences might represent opportunities for consciousness to access its higher dimensional capacities. Stress and challenge often have the effect of breaking down the habitual patterns that keep awareness confined to familiar territories, creating openings for expanded perception and deeper understanding. The practice of simply paying attention, of bringing conscious awareness to whatever is arising in the present moment, becomes a form of dimensional exploration. When you notice the quality of light in a room, when you feel the texture of fabric against your skin, when you listen to the subtle sounds that usually remain in the background, you might be training consciousness to perceive the higher dimensional information that is always flowing through ordinary experience. This perspective suggests that enlightenment or awakening isn't a matter of achieving some special state or gaining access to exotic realms of experience. Instead, it might be a matter of recognizing the 11-dimensional nature of reality that was always present, learning to see the extraordinary within the ordinary, discovering the infinite within the familiar. The people in your life, the relationships that bring joy and challenge, might be expressions of higher dimensional connections that extend far beyond the personalities and histories you can observe. When you feel inexplicably drawn to certain individuals, when conflicts arise that seem to carry significance beyond their apparent content, when love and understanding flow in ways that transcend logical explanation, you might be experiencing the natural resonance of consciousness operating through its higher dimensional structures. Even mundane activities like cooking, walking, or organizing your living space might become opportunities for accessing expanded awareness. When these activities are approached with presence and attention, when they're engaged as forms of meditation rather than mere tasks to be completed, they can serve as doorways into the deeper dimensions of existence that interpenetrate with every moment of ordinary life. The experience of beauty, whether in nature, art, music, or human relationship, might represent consciousness recognizing itself across dimensional boundaries. When a sunset takes your breath away, when a piece of music moves you to tears, when a work of art speaks to something deep within your being, you might be experiencing direct resonance with higher dimensional patterns of harmony and meaning. This doesn't diminish the mystery of beauty or reduce it to mere physics. Instead, it suggests that the capacity for aesthetic experience might be one of consciousness's natural technologies for accessing information that exists beyond the boundaries of ordinary perception. Beauty might be the language that higher dimensional reality uses to communicate with three-dimensional awareness. As we venture deeper into this exploration of higher dimensional existence, it's important to acknowledge both the profound possibilities and the significant limitations of our current understanding. The ideas we're exploring emerge from some of the most sophisticated mathematical frameworks ever developed, yet they remain largely theoretical, unproven by direct experimental evidence. M-theory represents humanity's most ambitious attempt to understand the fundamental nature of reality, but it exists primarily in the realm of mathematical possibility rather than established scientific fact. The equations are elegant, the logic is compelling, but the experimental verification remains elusive. This doesn't invalidate the exploration, but it does require us to hold these ideas with appropriate humility and wonder rather than dogmatic certainty. the connection between consciousness and higher dimensional physics, while tantalizing to contemplate, remains highly speculative. No scientific consensus exists regarding how awareness might interface with quantum processes, let alone with the exotic geometries of 11-dimensional space. These remain fascinating possibilities to explore rather than established facts to accept uncritically. What we do know with greater certainty is that consciousness possesses qualities that seem to transcend the mechanical behavior of classical physics. The unity of experience, the binding of disparate sensations into coherent perception, the emergence of meaning and significance from neural activity, all of these remain profound mysteries that current neuroscience can describe, but cannot fully explain. Recent research in quantum biology has revealed that quantum effects play important roles in biological processes, from photosynthesis to possibly even aspects of cognition. Microtubules in neurons do appear to maintain quantum coherence under conditions that were previously thought impossible. These discoveries suggest that the boundary between quantum mechanics and biological systems might be more porous than traditionally assumed, though the implications for consciousness remain a matter of ongoing investigation rather than settled science. The phenomenon of quantum entanglement, while thoroughly verified experimentally, continues to challenge our understanding of the relationship between information, measurement, and reality. The fact that particles can maintain instantaneous correlations across vast distances suggests that our ordinary concepts of space and separation might be incomplete. Whether consciousness participates in or has access to these quantum correlations remains an open question that some researchers are beginning to investigate. The mathematical elegance of M-theory and its potential for unifying all known forces continues to inspire physicists, even as they acknowledge the significant challenges in making testable predictions. The theory's requirement for 7 hidden dimensions compactified in complex geometric forms pushes the boundaries of human comprehension while offering a framework for understanding why the universe has the particular properties we observe. As you contemplate these scientific frontiers, notice how they invite a particular quality of mind, one that can hold both rigorous skepticism and open wonder simultaneously. The greatest discoveries often emerge from this balance, from minds that are disciplined enough to demand evidence yet flexible enough to consider possibilities that transcend current understanding. The history of science is filled with ideas that seemed impossible until they became inevitable. The notion that Earth orbits the Sun, that matter is composed of atoms, that time and space are relative, that the universe is expanding. All of these concepts required tremendous leaps of imagination, supported by careful observation and mathematical precision. We might be standing at a similar threshold now, contemplating the possibility that consciousness and reality itself operate through dimensions and processes that stretch far beyond our current ability to measure directly. The tools for exploring these frontiers are still being developed, the mathematical frameworks are still being refined, the experimental approaches are still being imagined. This uncertainty isn't a flaw in the scientific process, it's a feature. Science advances by pushing into the unknown, by asking questions that stretch beyond current answers, by maintaining the delicate balance between healthy skepticism and courageous exploration. The ideas we're contemplating together might prove to be stepping stones toward deeper understanding, or they might be revealed as beautiful mathematical poetry that doesn't correspond to physical reality. Either way, the exploration itself has value. It expands our sense of what might be possible. It challenges us to think beyond the boundaries of familiar concepts. It invites us to hold our current understanding lightly, while remaining open to discoveries that could transform our comprehension of existence itself. If you do exist in 11 dimensions, if consciousness does have access to higher dimensional information, if reality does extend far beyond the boundaries of ordinary perception, then how might this understanding transform the way you engage with daily life? This isn't a matter of adopting exotic practices or pursuing supernatural abilities. It's about recognizing the extraordinary nature of ordinary existence and learning to live with greater awareness of the mystery that surrounds and permeates every moment. The practice might begin with something as simple as paying attention differently. Instead of moving through your day focused primarily on tasks and goals, you might cultivate a quality of awareness that remains open to the subtle dimensions of experience that usually remain in the background. The felt sense of space around your body, the quality of light and energy in different environments, the intuitive impressions that arise in the presence of other people. This expanded attention doesn't require special training or mystical initiation. It simply involves remembering to notice what's already present but typically overlooked. The way your consciousness seems to extend beyond the physical boundaries of your head, the sense of being connected to something larger than your individual identity, the moments when insight or understanding seems to arise from sources beyond ordinary thinking, the cultivation of presence becomes a form of dimensional exploration. When you're fully present in any moment, when attention is gathered and aware rather than scattered and distracted, you might naturally begin to access information and perspectives that exist beyond the boundaries of ordinary three-dimensional cognition. This isn't about achieving special states or having unusual experiences. It's about recognizing the depth and richness that exists within every ordinary moment. The practice of deep listening, whether to other people, to nature, or to the subtle currents of your own consciousness, might serve as a technology for accessing higher dimensional information. When you listen, not just to words, but to the meaning and feeling behind them, when you attend to the spaces between sounds, as well as the sounds themselves, you might be training awareness to perceive patterns that exist across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Relationships become opportunities for exploring the interconnected nature of consciousness. Instead of seeing other people as separate individuals with whom you must negotiate and communicate across the gap of individual isolation, you might begin to sense the higher dimensional connections that link all awareness. This doesn't mean losing appropriate boundaries or personal autonomy. It means recognizing that the boundaries between self and other might be more fluid and permeable than typically assumed. The experience of creativity and inspiration takes on new significance when understood as potential access to higher dimensional information fields. When ideas seem to arrive from nowhere, when solutions emerge without conscious effort, when artistic expression flows beyond personal intention, you might be experiencing consciousness operating in its natural 11-dimensional mode. Learning to trust and cultivate these experiences becomes a way of developing higher dimensional capacities. Even the challenges and difficulties of life might be understood differently from this perspective. Instead of seeing problems as obstacles to overcome or evidence of personal inadequacy, they might be recognized as opportunities for consciousness to access capacities and perspectives that exist beyond the limitations of ordinary identity. Difficulty often has the effect of breaking down habitual patterns and opening awareness to new possibilities. The practice doesn't require believing anything in particular or adopting any specific worldview. It simply involves remaining curious about the nature of your own experience and open to possibilities that extend beyond current understanding. It's about living with what poet John Keats called negative capability, the ability to remain in uncertainty and doubt without irritably reaching after fact and reason. This approach to life cultivates what we might call dimensional sensitivity, the capacity to perceive and respond to subtle aspects of experience that typically remain unconscious. It's like developing a new sense organ, one that's attuned to the higher dimensional aspects of reality that interpenetrate with every moment of ordinary existence. As you experiment with these approaches, notice how they affect your sense of agency and possibility. When consciousness is recognized as extending beyond individual brains into higher dimensional structures, when awareness is understood as connected to information fields that transcend ordinary space-time, the sense of what's possible begins to expand in remarkable ways. Time itself might be far more mysterious than our ordinary experience suggests. From the perspective of 11-dimensional M-theory, the familiar flow of past, present, and future might be a limitation of 3-dimensional perception rather than a fundamental feature of reality. In higher dimensional space, all moments might exist simultaneously, accessible to consciousness under certain conditions. This possibility transforms our understanding of memory, anticipation, and the nature of temporal experience itself. Instead of moving through time like passengers on a train, consciousness might be more like a spotlight that can illuminate different regions of a higher dimensional landscape, where all temporal possibilities exist simultaneously. Memory wouldn't be the retrieval of stored information from the past, but rather consciousness accessing regions of higher dimensional space where those experiences continue to exist. Similarly, intuitive knowing about future possibilities might represent consciousness accessing regions of higher dimensional space where potential futures exist as present realities. This interpretation remains highly speculative, with no scientific consensus supporting it, but it provides a framework for understanding temporal experiences that seem to transcend the linear flow of ordinary time. The phenomenon of precognition, while controversial and poorly understood, points toward the possibility that consciousness might have access to information about events before they occur in linear time. Rather than dismissing such experiences as coincidence or delusion, we might consider them as potential evidence for consciousness operating through higher dimensional structures where temporal boundaries are more fluid than they appear from our ordinary perspective. The practice of meditation often involves experiences that seem to transcend ordinary temporal flow. In deep states of contemplative awareness, the sense of time can become radically altered. Minutes can feel like hours, or hours can pass in what seems like moments. The past and future can lose their usual significance as consciousness settles into an expanded present that seems to contain all possibilities. These temporal alterations in consciousness might represent glimpses of how awareness naturally operates when freed from the constraints of 3-dimensional perception. Instead of being limited to a narrow slice of the present moment, consciousness might naturally exist in a state of expanded temporal awareness that encompasses past, present, and future as a unified field of possibility. The phenomenon of synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that seem too improbable to be mere chance, might reflect the higher dimensional structure of time itself. When events align in ways that seem impossible from a linear perspective, this might indicate consciousness accessing regions of higher dimensional space, where causation operates through patterns that transcend ordinary temporal sequence. Dreams often feature temporal experiences that mirror these higher dimensional possibilities. In dreams, past and future can coexist, cause and effect can be reversed, and linear sequence can give way to more fluid forms of temporal organization. Rather than dismissing these as mere fantasy, we might consider them as natural expressions of consciousness operating in its higher dimensional mode. The experience of nostalgia, that bittersweet longing for past experiences, might represent more than mere memory. It could be consciousness resonating with regions of higher dimensional space, where those experiences continue to exist as present realities. The sense that the past isn't truly past, that significant moments retain a kind of eternal presence, might reflect the actual structure of higher dimensional time. Similarly, the experience of anticipation and future planning might involve consciousness accessing potential futures that exist as present realities in higher dimensional space. The ability to imagine and prepare for events that haven't yet occurred in linear time might represent consciousness naturally operating through temporal structures that extend beyond ordinary cause and effect. As you contemplate these possibilities, notice your own relationship to time and temporality. Does your consciousness feel confined to the narrow slice of the present moment, or does it seem to extend into past and future in ways that transcend ordinary memory and anticipation? The sense of being connected to something timeless, something that exists beyond the flow of moments, might be a direct experience of your higher dimensional nature. This understanding doesn't negate the practical importance of linear time in organizing daily life and coordinating social activities. Instead, it suggests that linear time might be one useful framework among many for organizing experience rather than the fundamental nature of temporal reality itself. As we approach the conclusion of this exploration, let us rest for a moment in the profound recognition that you are not merely observing the universe from the outside. You are the universe observing itself from within, consciousness arising from and returning to the deeper structures of reality that extend across all dimensions of existence. This isn't poetic metaphor or wishful thinking. It emerges from the fundamental insights of modern cosmology and quantum physics. The atoms in your body were forged in the cores of ancient stars. The energy flowing through your nervous system follows laws that operate across the entire cosmos, and the consciousness through which you experience this moment might be connected to information structures that extend throughout the 11-dimensional framework of reality itself. From this perspective, the search for meaning and purpose takes on an entirely different character. Instead of seeking meaning as something external to be discovered or achieved, you might recognize that your meaning incarnate, consciousness expressing itself through the particular configuration of matter, energy, and information that constitutes your unique perspective on existence. The qualities that make you distinctly human, your capacity for love, creativity, wonder, and understanding, might be natural expressions of the universe's tendency toward increasing complexity, consciousness, and beauty. You are not separate from the cosmic process of evolution and development. You are that process, temporarily organized into a form capable of self-reflection and conscious choice. This recognition brings with it both profound responsibility and ultimate freedom. If consciousness does extend beyond individual brains into higher dimensional structures, then the choices you make, the love you express, the understanding you cultivate might have consequences that ripple through dimensions you cannot directly perceive, influencing patterns of meaning and possibility that extend far beyond your personal life. At the same time, if you exist within an 11-dimensional framework where all possibilities are simultaneously present, then you are fundamentally free to choose which aspects of infinite potential you will actualize through your attention, intention, and action. The limitations you experience might be temporary constraints rather than ultimate boundaries, opportunities for consciousness to explore particular facets of existence rather than permanent imprisonments. The practice of life itself becomes a form of cosmic artistry, consciousness using the materials of space, time, matter, and energy to create expressions of beauty, meaning, and understanding that contribute to the ongoing evolution of reality itself. Every moment of genuine connection with another person, every flash of creative insight, every act of compassion and understanding might be the universe exploring new possibilities for its own development through the vehicle of your individual awareness. This perspective doesn't diminish the significance of personal growth, healing, and development. Instead, it places these activities within a cosmic context where individual flourishing contributes to the well-being of the larger whole. The work you do on yourself, the love you learn to embody, the wisdom you develop through experience might naturally radiate through higher dimensional structures to support the evolution of consciousness throughout the universe. As you integrate this understanding, notice how it affects your relationship to both solitude and connection. In solitude, you are never truly alone, for consciousness extends through dimensions that connect you to the deepest structures of existence. In relationship, you encounter not just other individuals, but other expressions of the same cosmic consciousness that manifests through your own awareness, other facets of the infinite jewel of existence reflecting the light of understanding back and forth across the dimensions. The journey of awakening to your 11-dimensional nature has no final destination, for it is the journey itself that constitutes the exploration. Each moment of expanded awareness, each recognition of deeper connection, each experience of transcendent understanding represents the universe coming to know itself more fully through the unique window of your consciousness. And in this recognition, perhaps the deepest mystery is revealed. You are not trying to become something other than what you already are. You are learning to recognize what you have always been, an 11-dimensional being temporarily focused through a 3-dimensional lens, infinite consciousness playing at being finite, cosmic awareness exploring itself through the beautiful limitations and possibilities of individual human experience. As this exploration draws to its gentle close, take a moment to simply be present with whatever is arising in your awareness right now. The thoughts moving through your mind, the sensations present in your body, the quality of space that seems to surround and interpenetrate your experience of being here. All of this might be far more extraordinary than it appears, expressions of an 11-dimensional reality that you have been exploring throughout your entire existence, whether you recognized it or not. The ideas we've contemplated together represent some of humanity's most ambitious attempts to understand the nature of existence. Yet they remain provisional, speculative, open to revision and refinement as our understanding deepens. The true value of this exploration might not lie in the specific concepts we've examined, but in the quality of wonder and openness it cultivates, the willingness to consider possibilities that extend beyond the boundaries of familiar understanding. Perhaps the most important insight is the simplest one. Reality is far more mysterious, far more beautiful, and far more interconnected than our ordinary perceptions suggest. Whether or not you literally exist in 11 dimensions, whether or not consciousness has access to higher dimensional information, the recognition that existence itself is a profound mystery worthy of lifelong exploration transforms how you engage with every moment of experience. The chair you've been sitting in, the air you've been breathing, the consciousness through which you've been listening, all of these remain exactly as they were at the beginning of our time together. Yet they might now shimmer with a different quality of significance, touched by the recognition that even the most ordinary aspects of existence participate in a cosmic story of such scope and grandeur that the human mind can barely begin to comprehend it. This is where we leave our exploration for now, but the journey continues with every breath, every thought, every moment of conscious attention you bring to the mystery of existence. You're already living in dimensions you may never fully understand, already connected to structures of meaning and possibility that extend throughout the cosmos, already participating in the universe's endless exploration of its own infinite potential. Sweet dreams, fellow traveller through the dimensions, the mystery deepens with every step. And if these questions about the nature of consciousness and reality continue to intrigue you, you might find our previous exploration particularly illuminating. Scientists are split. Is consciousness actually quantum? It examines the growing evidence that awareness itself might operate through quantum processes, setting the foundation for understanding how consciousness might naturally access the higher dimensional aspects of reality we've begun to explore today. There's something quietly revolutionary happening in the space between your thoughts right now. In that pause between one idea and the next, in the gentle gap where awareness rests before the next wave of experience arises, mathematics and consciousness might be dancing together in ways that would astonish even the most sophisticated physicists. This isn't mere poetry. It's an invitation to explore how the deeper structures of reality might be operating through the very awareness with which you're listening to these words. Consider this curious fact. The mathematical frameworks that describe 11-dimensional space share remarkable similarities with the way consciousness seems to organize experience. Both operate through principles of folding, unfolding, and dimensional reduction. Both involve the transformation of complex multi-layered information into simpler, more accessible forms. Both suggest that what appears unified from one perspective reveals intricate internal structure when examined more closely. When mathematicians work with Calabi-Yau manifolds, they're exploring geometric objects so complex that they require 6 dimensions just to exist. Yet these shapes can be compactified, folded into configurations so small they escape direct observation, while still influencing everything we can measure. Your consciousness might operate through similar principles, taking the vast complexity of 11-dimensional existence and reducing it to the manageable flow of 3-dimensional experience, while retaining subtle access to the higher dimensional information. The process of mathematical understanding itself offers intriguing parallels. When you grasp a complex concept, when sudden insight illuminates a previously confusing idea, something remarkable happens. Information that seemed scattered and disconnected suddenly organizes itself into coherent patterns. Relationships become visible that were always present but previously hidden. The mind seems to leap across gaps in logic, arriving at understanding through pathways that transcend step-by-step reasoning. This phenomenon of mathematical intuition has puzzled researchers for centuries. How do mathematicians arrive at proofs for theorems they haven't yet worked out? How do they know which approaches are likely to be fruitful before testing them systematically? Some interpretations suggest that mathematical truth might exist independently of human minds, accessible to consciousness through processes that transcend ordinary cognition. If consciousness does have access to higher dimensional information structures, then mathematical insight might represent moments when awareness temporarily accesses the geometric patterns that underlie physical reality itself. The elegant beauty that mathematicians find in their discoveries might reflect the actual aesthetic structure of the higher dimensional spaces that contain our universe. The practice of contemplative inquiry, approaching mathematical concepts through sustained attention and open awareness, rather than merely analytical thinking, might provide a more direct pathway to understanding. When you sit quietly with a mathematical idea, allowing it to unfold in consciousness without forcing comprehension, sometimes understanding arises that seems to come from deeper sources than rational analysis alone. Consider how this might apply to your own relationship with complex ideas. Instead of struggling to grasp difficult concepts through mental effort alone, you might experiment with a more receptive approach. Allow the ideas to rest in awareness. Notice how they feel rather than just what they mean. Pay attention to the subtle impressions and associations that arise when you contemplate them with gentle curiosity. This receptive approach to understanding mirrors the way consciousness might naturally interface with higher dimensional information. Rather than extracting data through forceful analysis, awareness might function more like a sensitive instrument that resonates with patterns of meaning and organization that exist beyond the boundaries of ordinary thought. As you continue to listen, notice how your experience of consciousness seems to have a kind of geography, regions of awareness that feel distinct yet interconnected. There's the clear, bright space of focused attention where these words are arising. There's the more peripheral field where background sensations and ambient awareness rest quietly. There's the deeper space where memories, associations, and creative insights seem to emerge from hidden sources. This topology of experience might reflect the actual dimensional structure through which consciousness operates. Different regions of awareness might correspond to different aspects of the higher dimensional framework, each providing access to different types of information and different modes of understanding. The ability to move attention fluidly between these regions might be a natural capacity for navigating 11-dimensional space. The phenomenon of insight and creative inspiration often involves a characteristic shift in the topology of consciousness. Awareness seems to withdraw from its usual focus on surface thoughts and sensations, descending into deeper regions where solutions and understanding seem to emerge spontaneously. This isn't mere metaphor. Neuroscientific research has shown that creative insights are often preceded by a decrease in activity in brain regions associated with focused attention and an increase in activity in networks associated with broader, more diffuse awareness. Some interpretations suggest that these deeper regions of consciousness might provide access to information that exists beyond the boundaries of individual brains. When you have a sudden insight about a problem you've been wrestling with, when the perfect word or phrase arises just when you need it, when understanding seems to download from sources beyond your personal knowledge, you might be accessing higher dimensional information fields that interpenetrate with individual consciousness. The practice of creative work often involves learning to navigate this topology skillfully, knowing when to engage focused analytical attention and when to relax into more receptive, intuitive modes of awareness. Artists, writers, musicians, and inventors develop sensitivity to the subtle shifts in consciousness that indicate when creative information is becoming available, learning to recognize and trust the deeper sources of inspiration. This process remains largely mysterious from a purely neuroscientific perspective. How does the brain generate novel ideas that weren't present in its previous states? How does consciousness access information that seems to come from beyond its stored memories and learned patterns? While no scientific consensus exists regarding these questions, the mathematical framework of higher dimensional space provides one possible avenue for exploration. The topology of consciousness also includes what we might call temporal regions, aspects of awareness that seem connected to different moments in time. Memory isn't just the retrieval of stored information. It often involves a kind of temporal travel, where consciousness seems to revisit past experiences with a quality of presence that transcends mere recollection. Similarly, anticipation and planning involve consciousness extending into future possibilities, with a vividness that suggests more than mere imagination. If consciousness does operate through higher dimensional structures, where temporal boundaries are more fluid than they appear, then these temporal aspects of experience might represent natural capacities for accessing information across different regions of higher dimensional time. The sense of being connected to something timeless, something that exists beyond the flow of moments, might be a direct experience of consciousness operating in its natural 11-dimensional mode. As you reflect on these possibilities, pay attention to your own experience of the topology of consciousness. Notice how awareness seems to move between different regions and modes, how attention can be narrow or broad, focused or diffuse, analytical or intuitive. This flexibility of consciousness might be evidence of its higher dimensional nature, its natural capacity to access information from multiple aspects of the 11-dimensional framework simultaneously. There's a peculiar quality to moments of deep understanding that transcends the mere acquisition of information. When profound recognition dawns, when truth reveals itself with unmistakable clarity, something shifts in the very fabric of experience itself. The boundaries between knower and known seem to dissolve, revealing a more fundamental unity where consciousness and reality participate in the same underlying structure. This phenomenon of resonant understanding might provide clues about how consciousness interfaces with the deeper dimensions of existence. Instead of being separate from the reality it observes, awareness might be an intrinsic feature of the 11-dimensional framework itself, a natural capacity for self-recognition built into the fundamental structure of space and information. Consider how understanding often arrives not through accumulation of facts, but through sudden reorganization of existing information into new patterns of meaning. You might struggle with a complex idea for days or weeks, gathering pieces of information that seem disconnected and confusing. Then suddenly, in a moment of insight, the pieces arrange themselves into a coherent whole that seems obvious and inevitable in retrospect. This process of understanding suggests that consciousness might function more like a resonance detector than a computational device. Rather than processing information through sequential logical operations, awareness might attune itself to patterns of meaning that exist as structural features of higher dimensional space. Understanding would then emerge through recognition rather than analysis, through resonance rather than reasoning. The aesthetic dimension of understanding supports this interpretation. Mathematical truths are often described as beautiful, elegant or harmonious. Scientific discoveries frequently involve recognizing patterns that possess an unmistakable sense of rightness that transcends mere logical consistency. This aesthetic quality of truth might reflect consciousness resonating with the actual geometric structure of reality itself. When you experience moments of genuine understanding, notice the qualitative aspects of recognition that accompany the cognitive content. There's often a sense of expansion, of consciousness becoming more spacious and encompassing. There's frequently a quality of peace or stillness, as if awareness has settled into alignment with something larger than itself. There's sometimes a feeling of coming home, of returning to a natural state that was temporarily obscured but never truly absent. These qualitative aspects of understanding might be direct experiences of consciousness operating in its higher dimensional mode. The expansion of awareness might reflect access to information structures that extend beyond ordinary three-dimensional cognition. The sense of alignment might indicate consciousness resonating with the geometric patterns that underlie physical reality. The feeling of return might suggest recognition of the higher dimensional nature that was always present but temporarily forgotten. This perspective on understanding has practical implications for learning and inquiry. Instead of approaching complex ideas through mental effort alone, you might experiment with creating conditions that support resonant recognition. This could involve cultivating states of relaxed attention, allowing ideas to rest in awareness without forcing comprehension, remaining open to insights that arise from deeper sources than analytical thinking. The practice of contemplative inquiry, approaching questions through sustained attention and open awareness, might be particularly effective for accessing the types of understanding that emerge through resonance rather than reasoning. When you sit quietly with a question, holding it in consciousness without immediately seeking answers, sometimes understanding arises that seems to come from the question itself, rather than from your efforts to solve it. As we approach the deeper currents of this exploration, take a moment to consider the extraordinary nature of possibility itself. Right now, in this very instant, infinite potential futures are somehow present within the structure of reality, waiting to crystallize into actuality through the mysterious process by which quantum possibilities collapse into definite outcomes. You exist at the creative edge of the universe, consciousness participating in the ongoing selection of which possibilities will manifest from the infinite field of what could be. This isn't merely philosophical speculation. Quantum mechanics reveals that reality exists in a state of superposition until the moment of measurement, when wave functions collapse and specific outcomes emerge from clouds of probability. But the mathematics suggests something even more profound. The possibilities that don't manifest in our timeline might continue to exist in parallel configurations of reality, creating what some interpretations describe as an infinite branching multiverse. From the perspective of 11-dimensional M-theory, this multiverse wouldn't exist as separate universes floating in some external space. Instead, all possible configurations would exist simultaneously within the higher dimensional framework. Accessible to consciousness under certain conditions, your awareness might naturally have access to information from alternate possibilities, parallel timelines, where different choices led to different outcomes. The phenomenon of creativity might represent consciousness accessing this field of infinite possibility directly. When novel ideas emerge in awareness, when artistic inspiration flows beyond personal intention, when solutions appear that transcend the recombination of existing knowledge, you might be witnessing consciousness drawing from the vast reservoir of unrealized potential that exists within the higher dimensional structure of reality. This interpretation suggests that creativity isn't just a human capacity, but a fundamental feature of existence itself. The universe appears to be inherently creative, constantly exploring new possibilities, generating novel forms and structures at every level, from quantum processes to cosmic evolution. Individual consciousness might be the means by which the cosmos explores its own creative potential, awareness serving as the instrument through which infinite possibility explores itself. If you enjoy exploring these ideas without interruption, members of our community get every episode 48 hours early, completely ad-free. They also receive extended discussions and bonus content that delves even deeper into these mysteries. You can join them whenever you feel ready, but for now, let's continue this journey together. The practice of creative work becomes a form of dimensional exploration when understood from this perspective. Instead of generating ideas through mental effort alone, creative practice might involve learning to access the field of infinite possibility that surrounds and interpenetrates ordinary consciousness. This would explain why creative insights often arrive when the mind is relaxed and receptive rather than focused and effortful. Many artists and inventors report that their greatest discoveries came not through deliberate intention, but through surrender to sources of inspiration that seemed to exist beyond their personal knowledge and control. They describe feeling like channels or vessels through which creativity flows, rather than the ultimate source of creative ideas. From the perspective of higher dimensional consciousness, this experience might be entirely accurate. The field of infinite possibility might also explain the phenomenon of synchronicity, those meaningful coincidences that seem too improbable to be mere chance. When events align in ways that appear impossible from a linear perspective, this might indicate consciousness accessing regions of higher dimensional space, where causation operates through patterns that transcend ordinary temporal sequence. Consider how synchronicities often occur around periods of creative breakthrough, spiritual opening, or significant life transition. During these times, consciousness might be more naturally attuned to the higher dimensional field of possibility, more open to recognizing and manifesting patterns of meaning that exist beyond the boundaries of ordinary causation. As you contemplate this field of infinite possibility, notice how it affects your relationship to choice and decision-making. If all possibilities exist simultaneously within the higher dimensional framework, then choosing becomes less about determining what will happen and more about selecting which stream of possibility you will align your consciousness with. This perspective suggests tremendous freedom and responsibility, the recognition that consciousness participates actively in the ongoing creation of reality. Your daily life might be far more experimental than you realize. Every moment of conscious experience represents a unique exploration of possibility, a never-before attempted configuration of awareness, matter, and meaning that contributes to the universe's ongoing investigation of its own nature. You are not just living your life, you are conducting an 11-dimensional experiment in the laboratory of existence itself. This experimental quality of existence becomes more apparent when you pay attention to the novelty that characterizes every moment of experience. Even the most routine activities, when approached with fresh attention, reveal aspects that have never been explored before. The cup of tea you drink this morning carries flavors, temperatures, and associations that are subtly different from every cup of tea that has ever been consumed. The conversation you have with a friend explores territories of meaning and connection that have never been mapped in quite the same way. From the perspective of higher dimensional reality, each moment of conscious experience represents a unique sampling of the infinite field of possibility, a particular way of organizing information, energy, and awareness that adds something genuinely new to the cosmic database of explored configurations. This suggests that existence itself is inherently valuable, not because of what you achieve or accomplish, but simply because consciousness exploring reality through your particular perspective contributes irreplaceable information to the universe's understanding of itself. This experimental view of existence transforms the relationship to both success and failure, pleasure and pain, clarity and confusion. All of these experiences become equally valuable data in the cosmic experiment, different ways of exploring the vast space of possibility that exists within the 11-dimensional framework. Difficulties and challenges become opportunities for consciousness to investigate regions of possibility that might otherwise remain unexplored. The phenomenon of learning and growth takes on new significance when understood as participation in the universe's experimental investigation of its own potential. Every skill you develop, every insight you gain, every capacity you cultivate represents the cosmos discovering new ways of organizing itself, new patterns of information and energy that expand the repertoire of explored possibilities. This perspective suggests that personal development and spiritual growth aren't just individual pursuits, but cosmic activities, ways that the universe explores its own capacity for consciousness, wisdom, and understanding. The healing you accomplish in your own awareness, the love you learn to embody, the wisdom you develop through experience might naturally contribute to the evolution of consciousness throughout the higher dimensional framework. The experimental nature of existence also applies to relationships and social interaction. Every encounter with another person represents a unique exploration of how consciousness can recognize and connect with itself across the apparent boundaries of individual identity. The love, understanding, and creative collaboration that emerge through relationship might be the universe investigating its own capacity for unity and coherence across different configurations of awareness. Even conflict and misunderstanding serve experimental functions, exploring the dynamics that arise when different perspectives encounter each other, investigating the processes by which consciousness can learn to bridge differences and discover common ground. From this perspective, the challenges of human relationship become opportunities for the cosmos to explore its own capacity for integration and harmony. As you reflect on your own life as an ongoing experiment in 11-dimensional consciousness, notice how this perspective affects your relationship to uncertainty and the unknown. Instead of needing to know outcomes in advance or control circumstances precisely, you might find freedom in recognizing that the experimental process itself has inherent value regardless of specific results. This experimental approach to existence cultivates what we might call cosmic curiosity, the recognition that consciousness is inherently exploratory, naturally inclined toward investigation and discovery. This curiosity doesn't require dramatic adventures or exotic experiences. It can be expressed through the quality of attention you bring to ordinary moments, the openness with which you engage everyday challenges, the willingness to remain surprised by the familiar. Learning to perceive reality from a higher dimensional perspective requires developing new forms of attention, subtle capacities for awareness that transcend the habitual patterns of three-dimensional cognition. This isn't about acquiring supernatural abilities or accessing exotic states of consciousness. It's about recognizing and cultivating the natural flexibility of awareness that allows consciousness to operate more fluidly across the dimensional spectrum of existence. The practice begins with something remarkably simple: learning to notice the spaces between things. In three-dimensional perception, attention typically focuses on objects, forms, and discrete phenomena, but higher dimensional awareness naturally attunes to relationships, patterns, and the invisible structures that connect apparently separate elements into larger wholes. When you look at a tree, three-dimensional perception sees bark, leaves, branches, and roots as separate components assembled into a recognizable form. Higher dimensional perception might notice the flow of energy that connects all these parts, the exchange of information between the tree and its environment, the subtle field of influence that extends beyond the visible boundaries of the tree itself. This isn't mystical imagination, but a different way of organizing perceptual attention. The development of this dimensional flexibility often involves learning to shift between different modes of awareness fluidly, like adjusting the focus of a camera lens to reveal different aspects of the same scene. Sometimes awareness operates in analytical mode, dissecting experience into component parts for detailed examination. Sometimes it functions in synthetic mode, recognizing patterns and relationships that unite diverse elements into coherent wholes. The practice of meditation naturally develops this flexibility of awareness, training consciousness to operate with greater range and subtlety. Different meditative approaches might provide access to different aspects of dimensional perception. Concentration practices that focus attention on specific objects might allow consciousness to penetrate deeply into the fine structure of reality. Mindfulness practices that maintain open awareness of whatever arises might provide access to the broader field of information that flows through higher dimensional space. But dimensional perception doesn't require formal meditative training. It can be cultivated through the quality of attention you bring to any activity. When you're having a conversation, you might notice not just the words being spoken, but the quality of space between the speakers, the subtle energetic exchange that underlies verbal communication, the way meaning seems to emerge from the interaction itself rather than from individual contributions. When you're walking in nature, you might experiment with expanding awareness beyond the visual field to include the felt sense of the environment as a whole, the way your presence affects and is affected by the ecosystem you're moving through, the information that seems to flow between yourself and the landscape through channels more subtle than the ordinary senses. The development of dimensional perception often involves recognizing that consciousness itself has qualities that transcend the boundaries of individual brains. Awareness seems to extend into the space around the body, to interpenetrate with the environment, to connect with other conscious beings through pathways that aren't limited by physical proximity. This isn't imagination, but direct experience, available to anyone who pays careful attention to the actual qualities of consciousness as they arise moment by moment. This expanded perception doesn't replace ordinary three-dimensional awareness, but enriches it, adding layers of information and meaning that were always present, but typically unnoticed. The familiar world becomes more vivid, more alive, more mysterious when perceived from a higher dimensional perspective. The ordinary activities of daily life begin to reveal depths of significance and beauty that were previously hidden. Consciousness might not be produced by brains anymore, the music is produced by radios. Instead, awareness might be a field phenomenon that permeates the 11-dimensional structure of reality, with individual minds serving as receiving and transmitting stations that tune into and contribute to the larger symphony of cosmic intelligence. This interpretation remains highly speculative, with no scientific consensus supporting it, but it provides a framework for understanding experiences that seem to transcend the boundaries of individual cognition. Consider how consciousness seems to exhibit properties that are difficult to explain through purely materialist approaches. The unity of experience, the way disparate sensations are bound together into coherent perception, remains mysterious despite decades of neuroscientific investigation. The emergence of meaning and significance from neural activity, the way consciousness seems to transcend the mechanical behavior of its underlying substrate, suggests that awareness might involve processes that operate beyond the boundaries of classical physics. If consciousness does function as a field phenomenon that extends through higher dimensional space, then individual minds might be more interconnected than typically assumed. The boundaries between self and other, between inner and outer, might be artifacts of limited perception rather than fundamental features of reality. This field-based model of consciousness could explain phenomena like empathy, intuition, and the spontaneous coordination that sometimes emerges in groups without explicit communication, the phenomenon of collective intelligence, the way groups can sometimes access insights and solutions that transcend the knowledge of individual members, might represent this field-based nature of consciousness in operation. When teams work together effectively, when communities respond coherently to challenges, when cultures evolve in coordinated directions, this might indicate consciousness operating through higher dimensional structures that connect individual minds into larger patterns of awareness. The practice of group meditation and collective contemplative activities often produces effects that seem to extend beyond the individuals directly involved. Participants frequently report experiences of expanded awareness, access to information that wasn't available to them individually, and a sense of connection to something larger than personal identity. While these experiences remain subjective and difficult to measure scientifically, they point toward the possibility that consciousness naturally operates through collective as well as individual structures. The ecological metaphor becomes particularly relevant when considering how individual consciousness might participate in larger fields of awareness, just as organisms in an ecosystem are simultaneously autonomous individuals and integrated components of larger systems. Individual minds might function as both independent centers of awareness and participating elements in higher dimensional fields of consciousness. This ecological understanding of consciousness has practical implications for how we approach personal development and social interaction. Instead of seeing individual growth as separate from collective well-being, this perspective suggests that personal awakening and social transformation might be aspects of the same underlying process. The evolution of consciousness at both individual and collective levels simultaneously. The cultivation of compassion and loving kindness becomes more than ethical behavior or emotional regulation when understood from this perspective. These practices might be ways of strengthening the higher dimensional connections that link all conscious beings, contributing to the health and coherence of the collective field of awareness that encompasses all life. As you contemplate this ecological view of consciousness, notice how it affects your sense of responsibility and connection. If individual awareness does participate in larger fields of consciousness, then the quality of your own mental and emotional states might have consequences that extend beyond your personal experience. The peace you cultivate, the understanding you develop, the love you embody might naturally radiate through higher dimensional structures to support the evolution of consciousness throughout the cosmic ecosystem. As this exploration draws toward its conclusion, we find ourselves returning to where we began, but with vision transformed by the journey we've shared. You are still sitting in the same place, breathing the same air, inhabiting the same body that began this investigation into the nature of 11-dimensional existence. Yet something fundamental might have shifted in your understanding of what these familiar realities actually represent. The chair supporting you might no longer seem like a simple collection of atoms arranged in a particular configuration. It might now appear as a temporary crystallization of information and energy within an 11-dimensional framework, a localized expression of patterns that extend throughout the cosmos. The air entering your lungs might reveal itself as a medium through which consciousness and matter participate in an ongoing exchange that transcends the boundaries of individual identity. Your body itself might no longer feel like the container of your consciousness, but rather like consciousness expressed through a particular configuration of 11-dimensional space. Awareness temporarily focused through the lens of human experience, while remaining connected to the infinite field of possibility that encompasses all existence. This shift in understanding doesn't require you to abandon practical engagement with three-dimensional reality. The bills still need to be paid, the relationships still require attention, the ordinary responsibilities of human life continue to demand your care and presence. But these activities might now be approached with a different quality of awareness, recognized as expressions of cosmic intelligence, exploring itself through the beautiful particulars of individual existence. The challenges and difficulties of life take on new significance when understood as opportunities for consciousness to explore regions of possibility that might otherwise remain inaccessible. Instead of obstacles to be overcome or evidence of personal inadequacy, difficulties become invitations for awareness to discover its own capacity for resilience, creativity, and transformation. Each challenge becomes a chance for the universe to learn something new about its own potential through your unique response to circumstances. The relationships in your life might now appear as expressions of the higher dimensional connections that link all consciousness, opportunities for awareness to recognize itself across the apparent boundaries of individual identity. The love you feel for others, the understanding that emerges through genuine communication, the creative collaboration that arises when minds work together, all of these might be recognized as natural expressions of consciousness operating in its 11-dimensional mode. Even solitude takes on new meaning when understood from this perspective. When you're alone, you're not truly isolated, but rather resting in the deeper field of awareness that connects all existence. The silence between thoughts, the spaciousness that surrounds experience, the peace that sometimes arises spontaneously, all of these might be glimpses of consciousness recognizing its own infinite nature. The practice of living becomes an art form when approached with this understanding, a conscious exploration of how awareness can express itself through the materials of space, time, matter, and energy. Every choice becomes an opportunity to select which possibilities will be actualized from the infinite field of potential. Every moment becomes a chance to contribute something unique and valuable to the cosmic experiment in consciousness. This perspective suggests that enlightenment or awakening isn't a matter of achieving some special state or gaining access to exotic realms of experience. Instead, it might be the simple recognition of what was always already present, the 11-dimensional nature of existence that was never hidden but only overlooked due to the habitual limitations of 3-dimensional perception. As we complete this gentle exploration of your 11-dimensional existence, take a moment to rest in the profound recognition that every ending is also a beginning, every conclusion an invitation to deeper inquiry. The ideas we've contemplated together represent not final answers, but doorways into mysteries that extend infinitely beyond the boundaries of human comprehension. Questions that spiral into ever deeper layers of wonder and possibility. In the quiet space that follows understanding, something remarkable often emerges. Not another concept to grasp or theory to evaluate, but a quality of openness that allows consciousness to rest in the mystery itself. This openness might be the most natural state of awareness, the condition in which consciousness operates most fluidly across the dimensional spectrum of existence. The journey we've shared together represents just one thread in an infinite tapestry of inquiry, one pathway through a landscape of possibility that extends far beyond what any single exploration can encompass. The 11-dimensional framework of M-theory, the geometric structures of hidden space, the potential connections between consciousness and higher dimensional reality, all of these remain active areas of investigation where questions outnumber answers and mystery deepens with every discovery. This uncertainty isn't a limitation of our current understanding. It might be the most honest and appropriate response to the profound nature of existence itself. The universe appears to be fundamentally mysterious, not because we lack sufficient information or sophisticated enough instruments, but because mystery might be woven into the very structure of reality at every level, from quantum processes to cosmic evolution. As you integrate these explorations into your daily experience, notice how this comfort with uncertainty affects your relationship to life's unanswered questions, the meaning of existence, the nature of consciousness, the possibility of purpose and direction in an apparently vast and impersonal cosmos. All of these perennial human concerns might be approached with curiosity rather than anxiety, wonder rather than worry. The practice of not knowing, of resting in questions without demanding immediate answers, might be a natural technology for accessing the higher dimensional aspects of consciousness. When the mind's habitual need to categorize and explain relaxes into patient attention, awareness often expands beyond its usual boundaries, revealing perspectives and possibilities that weren't available through analytical thinking alone. This doesn't mean abandoning rational inquiry or scientific investigation. Instead, it suggests holding these valuable approaches within a larger context of humble wonder, recognizing that every answer opens new questions. Every discovery reveals deeper mysteries. Every step forward in understanding illuminates vast territories that remain unexplored. The relationship between knowledge and wisdom takes on new significance from this perspective. Knowledge involves accumulating information, building models, developing theories that explain observed phenomena. Wisdom might involve something subtler, the capacity to hold knowledge lightly while remaining open to possibilities that transcend current understanding. This wisdom doesn't require vast learning or advanced degrees. It emerges naturally when consciousness approaches reality with genuine curiosity and appropriate humility, recognizing that the mystery of existence is far more profound than any individual mind can fully comprehend. This recognition isn't discouraging, but liberating, freeing awareness from the impossible task of complete understanding and allowing it to participate directly in the ongoing exploration of possibility. If you do exist within an 11-dimensional framework, if consciousness does participate in structures that extend beyond individual brains, if awareness does contribute to the ongoing evolution of reality itself, then your daily life takes on the quality of cosmic citizenship. Every choice you make, every quality of attention you cultivate, every moment of genuine presence becomes a contribution to the larger patterns of meaning and possibility that shape the universe. This cosmic citizenship doesn't require grand gestures or heroic achievements. It operates primarily through the subtle qualities of consciousness that characterize how you engage with each moment of experience. The presence you bring to conversations, the attention you offer to the natural world, the care with which you approach your own inner development, all of these might represent ways that individual awareness contributes to the health and coherence of the larger cosmic community. The practice of listening becomes particularly significant from this perspective. When you listen deeply to another person, not just to their words but to the meaning and feeling behind them, you might be facilitating the flow of information through higher dimensional structures that connect all consciousness. This kind of listening doesn't require special training or mystical initiation. It simply involves bringing full presence to the encounter, allowing awareness to expand beyond the boundaries of personal concerns and individual agenda. The cultivation of compassion takes on new dimensions when understood as a form of cosmic citizenship. Compassion isn't just an emotional response to suffering or a moral obligation to help others. It might be a natural expression of consciousness, recognizing its own fundamental unity across the apparent boundaries of individual identity. When you feel genuine care for another being's well-being, you might be experiencing the higher dimensional connections that link all awareness within the cosmic community. The compass that guided us through these 11 dimensions was never the mathematics alone. Though elegant it may be, it was wonder itself, that quality of consciousness that remains perpetually open to possibilities beyond the boundaries of current understanding. Whether M theory proves correct, whether consciousness truly interfaces with higher dimensional structures, whether the universe unfolds through geometric patterns we can barely imagine, the exploration itself transforms how we relate to the mystery of existence. You began this journey in 3 dimensions and discovered you might already inhabit 11. You started with familiar space and encountered realms where time flows differently, where possibilities branch into infinite configurations, where the boundaries between observer and observed dissolve into something more fundamental. Most remarkably, you made this discovery not by traveling anywhere, but by recognizing what was always already present in the space between your thoughts, in the awareness that witnesses your experience, in the consciousness that makes this very moment possible. This recognition doesn't require belief in any particular theory or acceptance of speculative interpretations. It simply asks you to remain curious about the nature of your own experience, to notice the qualities of consciousness that seem to extend beyond the mechanical behavior of neural networks, to appreciate the profound mystery that surrounds even the most ordinary moments of being alive. The 11-dimensional framework remains a mathematical possibility, not established fact. The connections between consciousness and quantum processes remain largely speculative, but the invitation to explore, to question, to remain open to the deeper currents of reality, that invitation is immediate and available in every breath you take. Perhaps that's the most important discovery of all. Whether you exist in 3 dimensions or 11, whether consciousness is produced by brains or participates in cosmic fields of information, you are already embedded in a mystery so profound that the human mind can spend lifetimes exploring its edges without ever reaching a final understanding. And maybe that's exactly how it should be. The journey continues with your next thought, your next moment of attention, your next encounter with the beautiful impossibility of being conscious in an apparently unconscious universe. Sweet dreams, fellow explorer of the dimensions. The mystery deepens with every step you take.